So, for our first game today, we're up against Loopy. We've brought ourselves a Lizardmen build against his Wood Elves. And we're going to be seeing how well we can... we're going to be testing out builds for Loopy, essentially. So, that means we're going to go very standard play styles. Then we'll see how well that does. Start off, just going to be skirmishing with our chameleon skinks, as is the usual. Mazda Mundi. We don't get to buff up their leadership. We are actually slow to the draw there. And our chameleon skinks do get routed off. Some way watchers too in position, skirmishing, firing their volleys. Generally being pretty hard pain. They're focusing my my Saurus, and that's going to be helping Loopy win the frontline fight. So our goals here are to kill the Way Watchers, and basically just that, essentially. Yes, some cavalry, but that's not especially scary. It's mostly just the Way Watchers that we have to take care of. If we can actually finish them off, then that is the main damage for my opponent dealt with. Now, these Eternal Guard are going to be a little bit of a problem too. And how do we want to deal with them? I guess we'll be sending in our Saurus to go ahead and fight them. We'll use Mazda Mundi with his many spells to do that too. And to, we'll just continue pressuring the Sisters of Twilight with our two solar engines, who are running a little bit low on ammunition. I'll have to be a little bit wary of that. Like, they are able to dodge fairly effectively, but perhaps now that they're actually a little bit out of position, we can net them down and then target them with all of our ranged troops. Should work out fine. And we'll also bring in our cavalry to make sure that these Glade Riders don't do too much damage to my skinks. Now, the Sisters of Twilight actually didn't focus fire them with the solar engines, so they shot in a little bit late. But nevertheless, still getting in some shots, doing okay. We've actually got the Sisters of Twilight fairly low now. But we're seeing a lot of our troops actually getting routed off here. It's not the greatest, but the Sisters of Twilight are getting quite low. We still have a lot of cavalry too, so the Way Watchers shouldn't be too scary. They're repositioning along the flank, so we'll bring in our cavalry to try and engage them. We'll also be bringing in Mazda Mundi to try and disrupt them. As for my two solar engines, I guess the solar engines can fire in on the Way Watchers too. That should be able to disrupt them. Ruination of cities will work out good also. But there's a little bit of a problem in that our front line is not especially strong. We have our Cold One Riders, and that's basically it. So we'll need to try and make sure that they stay safe. We also want to shut down the Way Watchers as best as possible. As for the Sisters of Twilight, they do manage to get their healing proc. I sort of just accepted that that would happen in this case. And we're mostly okay with it. Although a big breath attack does come down on my Saurus warriors. Definitely not great. And we have a lot of our cavalry stuck on some spears right now, so we'll disengage with them. Pull them into a safer position. And for the Sisters of Twilight, we'll see if we can finish them off with our skinks and the solar engines. Nevertheless, it's still going to be a difficult fight. Actually, with the balance of power, very much not in our favor here. But we'll see what we can do. Sisters of Twilight getting close to my cavalry. We won't be able to surround them, however. But I think as long as we can keep the Way Watchers away, we have a pretty nice advantage. So we'll use Mazda Mundi to throw down a net over here if we can. Try and save our Cold Ones. And then we'll use the solar engines to focus fire the Sisters of Twilight. However, we still have... we're running really low on the cavalry front. We still have a few of them that can charge down these spears by cycle charging them, but it's going to be a rough fight nonetheless. Still, we can rout off this large group of troops here. And as long as the Sisters of Twilight don't muck things up in this fight, then I'm feeling okay. As for the Way Watchers, we bogged them down with Skinks, which is about the best situation we could possibly be hoping for, given that we are disadvantaged. And it looks like a breath attack is coming down, but it friendly fires a lot of the spears too. It's a decent trade, nothing too crazy. Sisters of Twilight are getting quite low also, and we may be able to pull it back here if we can snipe them out. So the solar engines will be firing away. Mazda Mundi will be looking for targets to throw down his banishment on. And we still have the two Skink Chiefs, which in the late game are quite devastating. Sisters of Twilight getting really low now. The Way Watchers are able to rout off, or they are able to start shooting in onto my solar engines, which is not great. But not before he gets one last shot, and they should be able to rout off the Sisters of Twilight from here. Still, we will be losing one solar engine. Oh, a little bit of lag. We actually don't get the cold-blooded proc because of that. And now we have some Way Watchers to contend with. We do have Terror, and we do have our Chameleon Skinks. But the cavalry is coming in, and we're going to have to net them down. I misclick, and it looks like... Ooh, man, they just barely get netted down. Some of them actually pulling through, though. And that's really unfortunate. I meant to click on the banner, but instead we clicked on the ground behind them, allowing a unit of Glade Riders to actually escape. A bit unfortunate, but still not the worst. We have the two Chameleon Skinks, we have Terror, and we have one more AoE from Mazda Mundi. So we're going to see if we can use that to our advantage. A big shot does go down. Misses mostly. We're very thankful of that. And we're going to start cutting away with our Chameleon Skinks. Mazda Mundi will be running away too. And we'll be saving our banishment in case the infantry get grouped up on top of these Skinks. It's going to be the hope. And now it's just kiting and running around, trying to dodge shots as best as we can. A big volley does go down on the solar engine. But still, we're doing okay. It's been a pretty close game so far. We may even be able to pull back here. I think we still have a few units of Cold One Riders at very low HP. So let's see what we're going to do about that. We might save them for the late game since they're so close to routing anyways. And for now, it's just a wild goose chase against my opponent. Mazda Mundi can throw down a net too. Throw down a shield of the old ones also. I think that might work out okay. A big volley does come down. Hits me. But we can throw down the shield of the old ones now. And we're banking on these guys running out of ammunition. Specifically the Way Watchers. If they run out of ammo, then we should be able to win in melee. The solar engine is still pretty tanky, and Mazda Mundi is a decent fighter too. However, another volley does come in, hits the solar engine for a bit, but it doesn't finish it off. That's very nice. The balance of powers now slowly, very slowly creeping into our favor. Another shot goes down, and I fail to dodge again. Loopy, very nice firing. And at the opportune times actually be hitting my solar engine here. But his ammunition runs low. Another volley does come in. This time we do manage to dodge one of the volleys. And we can throw down another heal on Mazda Mundi. We're doing that because Mazda Mundi... Oh, that was too slow. And we dodge a few shots. But yeah, Mazda Mundi, he's a little bit more important than the solar engine. Just because he is my lord, and the solar engine, we definitely don't want it to get routed here. Another volley comes down, gets it very close to routing. We'll buff up its leadership so that it doesn't. Now we're going to fight this Spellsinger. There are two Chameleon Skinks and Mazda Mundi. If the infantry comes in, we have banishments. We also have a unit of Saurus too that will be able to do okay. It looks like they will likely get routed off, but we'll we'll see if he can, if the Source Warriors can stick around for a little bit longer. And as for Mazda, he can start dealing with the infantry. Meanwhile, our Skinks are going to be focus firing this Spell Singer, getting in their 2 shots, actually putting in decent damage. And Mazda, he can throw down another Shield of the Old Ones. And with all the infantry grouping up, you can quite safely throw down a Banishment, and that should be the end of them. We'll even heal up the Solar Engine to get its HP a little bit higher. Then I think we've done it. The Spell Singer, not an amazing combat lord, and with the Terror, it means that there won't be too many Wood Elf troops left. And with that, it looks like we just barely managed to win. There is apparently still a Wood Elf unit somewhere, since the game didn't end immediately. But still did it. Oh my goodness. Very close game. And yeah, we did a lot of damage to the Way Watchers early game. We also burned through the Sisters of Twilight HP pool. Essentially, we focused on we expected them to heal cap, so we just focused on getting in as much damage as possible. And for the Way Watchers, we were mostly just mitigating damage there. We did a decent job at it. The Solar Engines hit them for quite a bit. And really, if you look at the Solar Engines, they were actually really useful here. As for my Cavalry, classic Enticity play, losing all of them without getting a lot of value. That is a main point of micro that I have to focus on in the future. But our core tools, our single entities, did pretty good. For the next game, going the same build against Loopy since he's practicing his different builds. We have a Lizardmen build, and it's the same thing as last time. We have Cavalry, Solar Engines, Mazda, Skirmishers. For my opponent, he is nowhere to be seen. We don't know from which way we will be advancing. And I guess we just wait around until he shows himself. I saw some units over there. I would expect Skirmishers to show up sometime soon. Perhaps behind me. Perhaps through the forest. Another blip on the mini-map shows me that he is indeed in the forest. But we do not have to engage in the forest if we do not want to. And here we go, he does finally show himself. It's going to be a Spell Singer of Life, making itself known, charging headfirst into my army, followed by a lot of Glade Guard, Agbane tips, some Glade Riders that our Cold Wind Spear Riders can defeat, relative ease, and more Glade Riders. So it looks like a mostly Eternal Guard, Glade Guard build. Nothing too crazy here. He's going to be playing pretty aggressively. We'll move out our spears accordingly. Then we'll bring in our Skinks along the sides to support any cavalry fights. We can go fairly wide here, not really needing to go too tight. And we'll be using Mazda to cast a bunch of spells on top of these guys, since they are relatively grouped up. So, just continuing to spread out and to go wide. Solar Engines can now shoot into the archers, and they are one of the priority targets for us to be taking out here. So, we'll be doing that. Just firing the Solar Engines into them, kiting back with them, moving the Saurus, and then using our Skinks to skirmish our opponent. We actually have a pretty nice skirmishing advantage here. So I think that should work out just fine. Solar Engines should have reloaded at this point. So we'll turn them and we'll fire them in on Durthu. Why not? We could also try sniping out the Spell Singer. And I think we're going to do that instead. Firing in 2 shots on top of her. Focusing with Skinks. And hopefully she'll take enough damage where she has to waste heals on herself. It's much better than firing in on Durthu. Now Glade Riders moving in along the sides. See if we can deal with them. And for these Glade Guard, we'll start hitting them up with spells so that our Solar Engines can continue to fire. Mazda will be great for that. And nice. Really good ruination of cities. But we're in a bit of a tricky situation here. Our solar engines are starting to get compromised, but killing off this Spellsinger of Life is a really nice pick. Mazda has also done a lot of damage to all the troops here, and the Glade Guard are having a hard time actually finding a solid place to engage. We do lose off one solar engine though. However, for the for the Spellsinger of Life, she has wasted a lot of magic on herself, and this is essentially doing damage to Durthu here. So we will happily take this engagement, and we'll be focusing the cavalry of my opponent, just leaving Durthu for last, since he can be quite the pain to finish off. So yeah, we'll just be ignoring him as best we can, trying to get back our solar engines with Mazda, because we definitely want solar engines against Durthu. Yeah, we want both solar engines preferably, and that's going to be the goal. Now for all these Glade Guard, they are getting a lot of shots onto my solar engine. See if we can protect it with the shield of the old ones and just retreat with it. Meanwhile, this solar engine that routed actually ended up going into a pretty decent position, and we'll be using it to fire in on top of the Glade Guard. They are the main priority here, because as soon as the Glade Guard are down, my opponent doesn't have a lot of damage. It's just his infantry and Wood Elf infantry, renowned for being not great at combat. Now the Spellsinger of Life, we can engage on top of her, thus shutting down any healing from my opponent. But let's see, will we actually be able to kill her? The solar engine is taking a lot of damage, so we'll likely have to pull that out, and it looks like it will make it out safely, which is nice. As for Mazda, he's going to be running away from Durthu, since he definitely can't take that fight. And we're going to pull him away from these Glade Guard too. The Glade Guard, yeah, definitely. We don't want to get Mazda shot up by Glade Guard. We did have that happen before, and it was a very rough time. So we'll just be pulling him away. Pulling away the solar engine so they don't get sniped out either, and using the chameleon skinks to slow down Durthu. Now that we've won the frontline fight against our opponent, we can push up with our infantry to take out his ranged troops, and then from there should be good to go. Mazda just continuing to run. He is no longer in a threatening position, and the Glade Guard are on the run. We've won the cavalry engagement by only one unit of cavalry, despite having put a lot more money into it, but nevertheless it still checks out. We're doing fine. And here we go, sweeping into the Wood Elf backline, doing quite well. And we're going to heal up the chameleon skinks, since they are getting chased down by the Spellsinger of Life. A little bit of an awkward situation there. We'll net down Durthu instead of the Spellsinger, just because we want to actually fight her. Yeah, we want to be fighting the Spellsinger, so netting down Durthu allows us to do that. And then when she disengages, we'll be able to continue running away. If we had netted down the Spellsinger, Durthu would have caught up, and it could have ended up being a pretty bad fight. So at this point of the game, we've established a really nice lead, and we have to worry about closing it out now. So that means saving ammunition on the solar engines, so that they can kill off Durthu in the late game. We'll just turn off fire at will, and that should be enough. And for everything else, it's going to be keeping our heroes alive. So we'll be putting more micro into them. Our infantry is a lot less important in this situation, and really keeping these heroes safe is going to be pretty core to victory here. So we'll turn our solar engines to fire in on the Spellsinger, and once she's down, we can start hitting up Durthu. We don't want Durthu to take a lot of healing, since it is, as you can see here, it's very inefficient to try and put in a lot of damage on Durthu, because he has very high armor, missile resist, and so on. So we definitely don't want that. And we'll just be taking out the healing before we actually try to finish him off. Otherwise, he will just get healed. So that's going to be the goal. It's just closing it out. There's nothing too crazy that should go on at this point. Unless Durthu throws in a Manticore summon or something. And I guess we will make plays to make sure that that doesn't ruin us here. So we'll bring in our cavalry to assist in case of a Manticore summon. And that way, if it does dive in onto any of these solar engines, we'll be able to surround it. No problem. Now with the Spellsinger out of the question, it's just Durthu left. There's basically nothing else. So we'll bring in our Saurus Spears to dive in on top of him. Use both solar engines to fire away and poison him with the Chameleon Skinks. Combined effects of all of this should be enough to break him. And we'll even bring in the solar engines so that we can fire onto him point blank. This is important so that we don't miss any shots. And we're not too worried about Durthu disengaging here since Mazda Mundi, of course, has his nets. He's slowed by poison. There is really not a whole ton that he can do. So now that we're point blank, we'll start firing in with those solar engines. He'll be taking a ton of damage. And we won't be grouping our units because Sword of Death could be procced. And that may swing things heavily in my opponent's favor. We do have let's see, we do have a few more AoEs, so we'll use that just to take out the Eternal Guard. And now that Durthu is low, we'll surround him with our anti-large cavalry. And that should be able to rout him off. Put in a lot of damage at once, that routs him off at half HP. And would you look at that, it's gonna be GG. Nice. Rhymes and such. So once again, we did better on the cavalry fight this time. One of them almost paid for themselves. A landmark case of good cavalry play from myself. As for the Skinks, they dived in on the back lines. They did pretty well. And the solar engines too, of course, doing good, especially in the late game. This time it felt like the build was more cohesive, since our cavalry was able to play a much bigger part. And they helped our infantry win their respective fights. For our next match against Loopy, it's the same Lizardmen build. Because this is clan training. This is how, you know, as much as it is fun to play every faction in the game, I do think it is really important to really focus on these specific matchups. To really hammer down your, to really hammer down specific matchups. Because being slightly good at everything will generally put you in situations where your opponent ends up being very good at specific matchups. And that can lead to some pretty terrible losses that we would rather avoid. So the solution here is to just go for to really train a single matchup. So not as glorious as usual, but still fun nonetheless. It's the same Lizardmen build, and Loopy this time has gone for Deep Wood, Scout, Swift Shiver Shard. Spam. Going to launch a volley at my Chameleon Skinks. We'll be on the verge of routing. And these are Swift Shiver Shards. Their range is relatively short. We can push them back with our troops. We have cavalry that can move in too. So they're not too much of a problem here. We just have to make sure that our Chameleon Skinks don't get absolutely melted by them. Blade Lord here revealed itself, and we'll be trading decently using our solar engines here. That's going to be the hope. We can use the Skinks to make sure that they don't even get close to us. We're going to stay away from the forest since, oh man, it's a good thing we dodged there. We're going to stay away from the forest to make sure that cavalry doesn't come in and ruin our day. The Glade Lord will be able to snipe out many of my Skinks here, which is not the greatest position, and we're spamming healing spells into our Chameleon Skinks because they have a really high missile resist. By healing those guys makes them extremely efficient at actually doing, I think we can snipe out the Glade Lord here. By healing them, it means that they can absorb a lot more ammunition than usual. The Glade Lord, it does get stuck. We're going to hit it with all of our javelins, and we may be able to just win it out straight up right here and now, because Mazda Mundi with that big net has caught the Glade Lord. We're focusing it with all of our ranged firepower, and there we go. It's gonna go down. So we traded out a single Skink Chief, 300 gold, for my opponent's Lord. Just a misplay, and he's going to be tapping out. A very rough play there. Essentially, yeah, we punished his engage to snipe out the Skink Chief, and it was pretty clean from there. He did have a bunch of wild riders, but with our infantry support, there's not much they could have done. Here we go. We've switched up factions now against Loopy. We're playing Bretonia against the Beastmen, and the goal for today to keep our darned cavalry alive, because I just love suiciding them too much. And today is not the day where our cavalry will die. We will be making sure that we do everything we can to keep them safe. We'll see how that plays out going into the late game. Some chariots over here. Razor Gore will want to make sure that they don't run over my infantry without getting punished. And it's going to be a slow advance with our peasant archers. Let's just pull back these guys, move up the peasant archers, and slowly creep up with our cavalry. There's no real need to be hasty here, since yeah, there's nothing really pressuring us. There's no Ungor raiders. He's not really cycle charging. There's no artillery, no Cygors. So we feel pretty safe. We can dance around a tiny bit with our heroes, and then we'll be good to go. Let's see, in general, we'll just use our spears to screen out these Centaurs. Our archers will then be able to bog them down and do pretty well there. So, nice. Just a lot of skirmishing back and forth. He's repositioning really heavily onto this far flank. So we'll move in more cavalry to support. We'll bring our infantry over to rotate while leaving our peasants in the same position. And then that should work out just fine. We'll continue pushing up to try and push that cavalry away. And we should end up getting some pretty nice trades. The big overload is coming in, however. And we need to get our infantry in position as quickly as we can, because the overload needs to be responded with properly here. We're fine leaving more of a gap in the center line, because we have our hero squad to defend there. And with that, we should be okay. Our hero squad, the Minotaurs, actually now diving in. A little bit of a worry. And we really want to keep these peasant archers safe. Fey Enchantress now getting surrounded with, we'll throw down a chalice of potions to pull all of those troops away. That'll free up the Fey Enchantress and result in a pretty nice trade for us. For our cavalry, they're going to start cycle charging all of these troops that are charging into us, or counter charging at the very least. We have our knights at the ready to defend the Fey Enchantress. If she does get surrounded, we'll have to be very careful that we put them in safe positions. And for this mobile Beastmen force, we need to make sure that they don't dive in onto our position too effectively. They feint a charge, which gets my cavalry to move in a tiny bit. Then we'll pull back away to safety. We'll heal up these guys and continue to pepper away with my peasant archers. Put them on guard mode so that they don't get out of position. And then we should be good to go. Now, a lot of spells have gone down onto my knights. Actually, a Fate of Buna will counter that with a regrowth. And the cycle charges are going to be a little bit painful here. However, we get a counter charge onto those Centaurs. And as for these Centaurs, we'll be able to clamp them in with some spears. Generally, some pretty nice trades. Our knights have been able to counter charge, but I think we might have gone baited here. Minotaur counter charge coming in. Seemingly, seeming to actually give a lot of trouble here. Not to mention these guys, these Centaurs also moving on in. But some of our knights have escaped and we are able to charge them. So, in general, this engagement is going very mixed. We definitely want to get our archers firing in on top of there, and we'll see if we can take out the minotaurs. As for our cavalry, we'll pull them back to safety, and these guys chasing off these centaur throwing axes will want to disengage eventually before they get kited out. We definitely don't want that to happen. As for this left flank, the centaurs are being pushed back, and the fact that we've gotten rid of the support of my opponent here is great. But we did lose one of my units of knights. Definitely a painful loss. It gets surrounded by by Chaos Spawn Summon. It's definitely pretty rough. Let's see, a lot of cavalry moving in here too now, but we have our knights coming in to support. They can't really dive in on top of us, and we've killed off all the minotaurs. So that's definitely nice. Pull back these knights now so that they don't get kited. Move in the infantry to block. And I think we managed to take some effective trades here, but definitely not without some loss. Now Mogre is even moving up. We will try to pin him down with our hero squad and see how that goes. Let's see here. We'll move in with the Fey Enchantress, move in with our heroes, throw down a heal, and there we go. We did manage to pull out another victory against Loopy. Working out pretty well. Essentially, our hero squad did really well against the minotaurs, and we traded fairly effectively with the cavalry, just keeping them safe, countercharging specifically, and generally working out pretty well from there. His skirmishers did not get a lot of value thanks to my peasant bowmen, so nice. I think that went okay. There were some misplays on my part, but we generally got better trades. So here we go. It's once again me against Loopy, playing as the Coast against the Counts, trying to figure out how to win this darn matchup. I'm having a pretty rough time with it against the top players. Vampire Coast mains will generally win out against me. So we're going to see if we can pull out a win here today. A Strigoi Vampire Lord and a Terrorgeist will be dominating the skies. But with our handgun support, we should be able to do fine. He can't summon zombies onto the back line thanks to Luther and his combat prowess. And the handguns will keep Luther safe, which means that these two Terrorgeists will be quite far away from us. However, we do have to worry about the frontline fight. There's a lot of Graveguard to chew through, but thankfully not too much cavalry to dive into the back line. Just a whole ton of infantry. And that's going to be the main challenge for today. Fellbats taking along the flanks. We have our own Fellbats to delay those flanks, however. So generally not the worst. Generally not the worst. Some bats do move in. It looks like they want to be... it looks like they want to be engaging my forces. We may need to throw down some heals on top of the bats. Luther shielding away against these Fellbats, but can he shield against the Terrorgeists? We will have to see. The long flank is beginning for my opponent. The handguns are still alive. Should be two black coaches here, but it looks like Loopy opting not to go for black coaches this game. And let's see, some zombies are beginning to creep through, but we've held fire on our bombers. The reason we did this is because they have a little bit more AP holding fire using their passive ability, and they'll be able to use that to do a little bit more damage to these Graveguard. Not a lot of damage, apparently, since it's looking like, they're just not doing a lot of damage to the Graveguard. I guess those bomber nerfs really coming into play, but the engagement timing for my opponent is coming in a little bit late. So we'll see if we're able to punish that correctly this time around. The bombers are getting some really nice shots, and our zombies have shielded for the handguns exceptionally well here. And the Terrorgeist, going to be debuffing them using our caster, and we'll use Luther to make it so that the Strigoi Lord can't use any of his abilities. Hopefully that will turn things in our favor. We'll use our handguns to support Luther too, and throw down a healing on top of him. Keep him safe. And we'll see if he can take that fight. I'm not sure if he can, but I think it should go okay with the gun support. Luther is taking a lot of damage, but still holding out fairly well. And if we can take out at least one of these dragons, then I'll be feeling a lot more comfortable. As for the Grave Guard, we've done a nice job hitting them with the bombers. But one of our guns is compromised, only from the back though, so it will still be able to fire. And as for Luther, he's losing the fight pretty hard now. So pull him away, use the guns to finish off the Terrorgeist, and then come back to fight the Strigoi Lord another day. That is, if Luther can actually escape. He takes a lot of damage on the retreat, but he does manage to successfully retreat, and that is what's important here. A breath attack comes in, hits Luther for 1,000,000 damage, and he's looking real rough. Oh, and there goes Luther. A very, very rough fall for us. That means our main single entity killing power is down. That is definitely not great. Graveguard great weapons hacking apart at my at my rotting Prometheans, and suddenly things are looking a little bit scary, having lost our lord, overcommitting with him, and man, are these Graveguard really annoying. The zombie bombers with the AP damage nerf proving rather effective, making it so that they just can't kill Graveguard as efficiently. More of a lightly armored infantry killer at this point. And I think we actually lost the game despite having a really nice lead and letting our bombers use a lot of their ammunition. It appears sadly was not enough, but we'll keep playing this out. These Vampire Counts games can be swingy sometimes depending on the forces that you face. So that's what we're going to be hoping for. We'll use another zombie pistol mob summon here. An overcast. Looks like it goes down. But our caster is out of Winds of Magic anyways. I think that's fine. And we're just hoping that we can shoot this Terrorgeist to death. Meanwhile, this pistol summon can deal with, I guess they'll be focus firing the Terrorgeist too. And if we can take that down, that's a small lead ahead of us. But not a large one. The Strigoi Vampire Lord still at high HP. The Graveguard is still good, so we'll just call it GG here. And that's it. Yeah, I think I would have won it if I didn't lose Luther there. We could have thrown down a heal on top of him. But, man, what a swing. Luther taking a ton of hits trying to retreat and causing the loss. Now, what really surprised me here was that the bombers didn't do as effectively as I would have thought. Lupi essentially marched right up into the bombers, but these Graveguard great weapons, their high armor, was able to defeat them and just essentially tank all of the damage. So I'm going to rule this style of build out. I think, oh man, oh, that was pretty rough. I think before the patch we would have killed the Graveguard though, given how many shots we had, but that's still not optimal enough to fight this matchup in the future. So here we go for the final game of today. It's going to be myself versus Lupi again. Lupi playing as the Wood Elves against my Rush Cavalry heavy build from the High Elves. We brought some archers because we're not worried about our front line getting compromised. Alariel will be flying around, and there's a Glade Lord about. So that means we could see skirmishers from Lupi. We'll have to be very wary not to get shot at by Way Watchers. We don't want to get Larry netted. All very important things. He has 3 Wild Riders, which puts them, and some spears, which means I think he has space for 2 or 3 Way Watchers. That's sort of what's expected here. And there we go, they do reveal themselves. Single volley into my archers, taking them down to half HP. Stealthing once again so that we cannot actually deal with them. They are a little bit out of position though, and I think what we're gonna do, we're gonna move in our cavalry to engage here. Chase down the Way Watchers. And hopefully, oh, we're gonna get netted. Let's pull back with Alariel. And yeah, we're gonna be taking a big engagement against the archers. And nice, we do manage to dodge there. We're going to focus them down with our own archers. And because they don't have a lot of space to run to, they're going to be taking a lot of damage. They can't really fire in on top of my cavalry because we will be moving up with our own archers and firing away. We'll fire at the Way Watchers. We'll bring in our cavalry to engage. Alariel will be moving in to heal up these guys. And it's going to be a big ol' engagement over here. Our archers will be able to punish the Way Watchers greatly. Alariel helping in this fight to do good. Faw's protection here for the extra armor makes our troops nearly impossible to kill. A big pendulum comes down, but it's not enough since we still have a lot of cavalry left. They are extremely high armor, and you can see here these Wild Riders are just going to be fighting these guys forever. There's not a lot that my opponent can do versus that, and then we should be good. We'll charge into these Wild Riders. They don't have any AP, so we should be able to win it. And there we go. We've chased off one unit of Wild Riders again over here. Our archers can now kite back against the Wood Elf infantry. And I think we have this game pretty well and won. Not to mention, we also have Star of Averlorn. We'll be throwing that down in a second. And then, let's see, yeah, then we'll be good. So we're going to group up with all of our cavalry here. We'll throw down a big Star of Averlorn. Get these guys healed up. And our archers will continue kiting out these Eternal Guard. The infantry of Lupi is just a little bit too thin to really stop the cavalry from running over things. And there's not enough infantry to really stop himself from being kited here. You can see here that we've pulled apart the Eternal Guard rather well. He has netted down a unit of Silver Helms, which means that they will likely be routing, but we can catch the remaining Way Watchers, and that means it's just gonna be a little bit of infantry left for Lupi, and that's about it. Just some Eternal Guard, and they're not especially scary. Lupi knows we can cycle charge them to death in the late game, and is gonna be tapping out. So a pretty nice build. I think I would have to worry if he had gone for a Tree Man type of rush build. We don't have a lot of AP here, and that probably would have turned out pretty badly. Versus the cavalry and kite builds though, this is quite nice. And the cavalry even lived. They lived to tell the tale. A rare sight when it comes to me, but getting more and more common. This actually worked out really well though. I know from experience that Wild Riders are terrible against armor. And you can see here, they didn't even pay for half of their value. So there we go. And that's going to be it for today.